Okay, welcome everybody. Can you hear me okay back there? All right. It's really my singular pleasure to be with you today to have this opportunity to introduce Gerald Chan. Before I get into that, I should introduce myself. So I'm Ben Holton. I'm the Ronald P. Lynch Dean of the College of Agriculture and Life Sciences at Cornell. I know a lot of you, but sometimes I don't get to interact with all of you. Today marks an exciting culture change in the college. We've always had a significant contribution to the world around us as the only Ivy League land-grant institution. We've been dedicated to serving society from New York to the world and back again since our founding. But the culture of innovation, one that prioritizes technology transfer, thinks deeply about our commitment to the world around us, and imparts a high level of disruptive innovation into the fabric of what we do, is something that we continue to explore and push the front edges on in CALS. A lot of this begins with our roadmap to 2050, the strategic vision that said, rather than thinking in 5-year increments, let's think about the world well into the future. To me, universities are best poised when they are asking deep questions about that future and de-risking science, innovation, and education to ensure that the next generation is at the cutting edge of bending the future toward our direction. Now in CALS, we think about this across an ensemble of different areas. Those include sustainable agriculture, food security, environmental stewardship, and especially one that prioritizes interdisciplinary convergence and transdisciplinary thinking. This is also personified in our moonshot strategy that has assembled teams of researchers across disciplines to further disrupt the departmental domains and disciplinary structures, which are critical but are insufficient to creating a better world in the future. As we embrace our moonshot thinking, we seek to solve complex challenges that have real-world significance, including those that seem impossible, with big ideas, innovative thinking, spanning disciplines as well as technologies. And yet today we face unprecedented challenges at the global scale and right here in New York in terms of food security, the sustainability of our planet, human health and disease, and the need for moonshot thinking and innovative solutions has never been more important. And this is why I am especially excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Gerald Chan, a remarkable individual who embodies the spirit of innovation that we celebrate here at CALS. In many respects, he is pushing us into the future. Dr. Chan represents exactly what we strive to be in our community, with a culture change that appreciates the ability of our scholars to identify breakthrough scientific opportunities and ensure that what happens in CALS does not stay in CALS, rather goes out to benefit the world around us. As co-founder of Morningside, a venture investment enterprise that works on technology-based startups, Dr. Chan has demonstrated an extraordinary talent for translating groundbreaking research into viable companies that address critical medical needs. Working with academic scientists, he started over 24 biotech companies across diverse therapeutic areas. In a number of cases, these companies opened an entirely new field of medicine, such as diseases arising from mitochondrial dysfunction or dysregulation of innate immune system function. Now, what makes Dr. Chan's work particularly relevant to our CALS community is his remarkable ability to bridge the gap between academic research and practical application. His leadership as chairman of Apellis Pharmaceuticals, a NASDAQ-listed biotech company, and his involvement with numerous biotech ventures demonstrates how scientific excellence can be successfully commercialized for broader impact. Now, if that wasn't impressive enough, Dr. Chan's pioneering work in applying artificial intelligence to healthcare delivery is taking off. Through companies like Linus Health, he's pushing the boundaries of what's possible in early detection of cognitive impairment. Through Cognia, He's revolutionizing how we diagnose autism spectrum disorders, and through LESO, he's transforming the delivery of cognitive behavioral therapy using agent-based AI. Dr. Chan's academic credentials are equally impressive. He received his BS and MS degrees in engineering from UCLA and master's degrees in medical radiological physics and a Doctor of Science degree in radiation biology from Harvard University. Dr. Chan obtained his postdoctoral training in the Laboratory of Biochemical Pharmacology at the Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. He has been honored with honorary degrees from 8 universities and was elected to membership in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and received an honorary fellowship in the British Academy of Social Sciences. In 2019, he gave the Andrew Carnegie Lecture at the University of Glasgow, Scotland, and held a fellowship at Trinity College at Cambridge University. In 2025, he gave the inaugural Dean's Distinguished Lecture at the College of Computing, Data Science, and Society at the University of California, Berkeley, which was an outstanding lecture. Thank you for sharing that with me, Dr. Chan, and the inaugural McKee Lecture at the University of Michigan. His dedication to advancing scientific research and education is evident in his service as a trustee of the Scripps Research Institute and his advisory roles at prestigious institutions, including the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health. He chairs the advisory committee of Emory University Center for Innovative and Affordable Medicine and was past chair of the Innovation Advisory Committee of the Wellcome Trust in London. In Dr. Chan, we truly see the embodiment of what we aspire to be here at CALS, the perfect synthesis of scientific excellence, entrepreneurial spirit, and commitment to solving global challenge. So it is my great pleasure to welcome to the stage a true innovator, a visionary, a mentor, a dedicated philanthropist, and a transformative force in biotechnology and healthcare, Dr. Gerald Chan.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. You're all very kind. Thank you for this invitation to be with you today. What I propose to do is I'll make a few remarks about innovation in general, and then what I'll do is to talk about 3 companies as 3 case studies, each of which will illustrate some aspects, of ventures, of startups, and then Ben and I will engage in a dialogue or involving all of you, whatever you want to talk about. So I'll try to keep my remarks fairly brief so we leave time for interaction. One question I've been giving a lot of thought to in the last year is, what does it mean to be an educated person? Now that there is generative AI, what does it mean to be an educated person? And therefore, for those of you who are professors engaged in educating others, how do you educate? What is the product? You should have a product profile. Like, what would you like to inculcate, in your students? For people like me or people of my vintage, we came from an era of scarcity of knowledge. And therefore, to possess knowledge was sufficient to constitute you an educated person. And the reason why we have classrooms of, 1 teacher, 30 kids, is because in the Victorian days, there were very few people who were educated enough to be teachers, and you had to amortize that teacher across 30 kids. But today, any one of you, can go on ChatGPT and you have your personal tutor. You can ask any question you want, and there's no better teacher, that will answer all your questions. So what does it mean, to be an educated person anymore? Now, my conclusion is this. It is no longer about whether you have knowledge, because everybody can have knowledge at their fingertip. You are limited only by your capacity to ingest knowledge. A real educated person, or the differentiation now, is what you can do with what you know. It is not whether you have knowledge, but what you can do with what you know. This line of thinking is very much in line with the American philosophical tradition of pragmatism. Whether it be Charles Peirce or William James or John Dewey, these philosophers had long proposed, that knowledge has to be tested by utility. And so I think today more than ever, what we define as an educated person must be one who not only possesses knowledge, but he can do something with the knowledge. Now, if I were to reflect on my own, university education, I would say I got a lot of A's, but I would be, by this standard, an abysmal student. I didn't have the foggiest idea. I said, I have 2 engineering degrees. It would be an utter shame to the profession who called me an engineer. Because I couldn't make anything. I couldn't tell a nut from a bolt. And, so today, the world has changed. We must aspire not only to know things, but also to be able to do things with what we do. And we must train our students accordingly. So that's the first point I want to make. AI has changed everything. Now, up to last year, there was still a lot of this debate. Should the students be allowed to use AI? Oh, is that cheating? And that's just nonsense. When the calculator came out and they said, should we allow students to use calculators? When the iPad or the PC came out, they said, should we allow students to use, computers? And now, we're just repeating the same history. Now AI is here. Should we allow the students to use AI to answer exams? No, it's not a matter of them answering your same exams. It's about you having to change your exams. In fact, with introduction of every technology, the capability, got elevated. And so today with AI, I think we are poised for another step function where what we can do with what we know will be elevated. And accordingly, I would encourage all of you professors to assess your students, in this way. It's no longer recall, regurgitation. It has to be, what can you do with it? Now, in some ways, problem sets, is a form of that, but problem sets tend to be well-controlled settings. The conditions and what you know and what you don't know tend to be pretty well-bounded, and those represent idealized cases. But if our students were to go out to the real world and solve real-world problems, those are unbounded conditions, and those problems are messy. And the real test is not so much in obtaining answers as it is to ask the right question. I think education today must have a shift. If higher education is to become relevant to the real society, the real world out there, higher education has to change. In some ways, higher education is under attack by this government, but I would say never waste a crisis. This crisis is one that is giving us an impetus to change in ways that we would better educate, the young people for the future. Okay, so that's the first point. The second point I'd like to make is startups is now a real viable career path. This is a career path that was not thought of, not even in the minds of the students. The best, would go into a professional school to become a doctor, a lawyer, or to go to business school, become, bankers or consultants. Those are well-established career pathways. But by and large, working for somebody and doing something that somebody told you what to do. But today, there is another new career path that is open, and that is for you to do a startup. That you have identified a problem that you are interested in solving, and that you would marshal the resources so that you can form an entity to solve that problem. It is entirely self-motivated, self-defined. Now, I'm seeing today even undergraduates starting companies. And one of my 3 cases, I'll talk about one. Someone I talked to today, I forgot who it was, said he it was Bryce, right? Bryce? Yeah, well, wasn't it you who told me that your professor told you, if you want to do a startup, that you have to go get your PhD?
Yeah, that's right.
Right. So that's very true, or that tend to be more true in the life sciences. That having a PhD is very useful, and I absolutely have no regret, for all the education that I got. But if you're talking about working in software, in AI, in those areas, the undergraduates are the most creative people. And I'm seeing that they are doing a better job than the graduate students. It's almost self-selecting. I would say today doing a startup is a real viable career path, but it is one that is fraught with risks. You may not be able to raise money. You may have to live on cup noodles for a long time, or sleep in your friend's couch for months. It tends to be it doesn't have to be, but it may be all none outcome, So you may not go anywhere. But of all the people I have talked to that have done startups and didn't work, I rarely detect anyone who had regrets. So what you learn in doing a startup is very valuable, whatever you do in the future. And remember this, no career choice today is cast in stone and permanent. You'll go through life, with 5, 7, 9 career switches. Probably careers that don't even exist today. So it doesn't matter, you're young, you can take risks, do it. As a school, I would say I'm very happy to see what you're doing today. Under Ben's leadership, this is your 2nd year of celebrating innovation, meaning that professors, students are coming together to solve real-world problems. That should be celebrated. That should be in the culture of this place. And culture takes time to build up. Over time, this is just the second year, maybe, another few more years, and then you begin to attract students who come here because they want to solve problems. They see this as a career path. I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, near Harvard Square, and I have a couple of apartments that are rented to these undergraduates. Each one of them has done a startup, and each one of them has raised $500,000. And they live together, they do this startup thing together, and I said to the Dean of Admissions at Harvard, I said, let me arrange a time for you to meet these guys so that you can recognize this phenotype. So that, when you review these applications, this phenotype would jump out at you. It starts at the admissions office. I would give the same counsel to whoever runs admissions, admissions here. Well, graduate school tend to be, the admissions tend to be, run by the professors themselves. So each one of you, as you admit students, think about this dimension, which in the past had not been part of the formula. Okay. I'm a venture capitalist. What do venture capitalists do? Venture capitalists work with founders to build companies, to solve problems. Now, oftentimes I hear people say, oh, VC and PE, private equity. Now, I'll tell you, the two can't be more different. Private equity is a debt-driven endeavor working with existing assets and reshuffling them and trying to gain pricing power, by consolidation of the industry. Venture capital, on the other hand, we are about creating something that doesn't exist as of yet. What do? I create the future. I create something that doesn't exist yet. Now, how do I make those choices? I don't have a crystal ball, like you don't have a crystal ball. And I would say over the years, having just looked at thousands of cases, business plans, I sort of developed a kind of pattern recognition and really a kind of sixth sense, of what problems are worth solving, as well as realistically, with resources available, can be solved so that, we're not just, tilting at a windmill. And this also brings up, one point, and that is the founders. Oftentimes what we do as venture capitalists, we bet on the founders. Well, hopefully, when I go through the three cases, it'll bring out some of these points. So why don't I do that? Three companies I want to talk to you about. One is a company that originated from here in Cornell, Weill. About 20 years ago, I was introduced to a friend, an architect, who said, oh, you're going to meet my sister, who is a professor at Weill. And so I met her, and she had published a paper in the Journal of Biological Chemistry, and she talked about these 4 amino acid peptides, just 4 amino acids, and she had a graduate student who had the wits to fluorescent label these peptides and give them to the cells, and lo and behold, they only light up the mitochondria. It was just like rings. You couldn't find them diffuse in the cytoplasm nor in the nucleus. They just go right to the mitochondria. And then she used detergent to remove the outer membrane. You know, mitochondria has two membranes. And lo and behold, the fluorescence was still there. So we knew that much, that it binds to something in the inner membrane. And then she had shown that if you take a explanted heart from a rat and put it in a St. Thomas solution, organ preservation solution, overnight at 4 degrees, if you throw in some of those peptides, then upon reperfusing that heart is so much more protected and can function much better than without the peptides. That was all that was known about those peptides. Those peptides, by the way, came from the surface of reptiles, which she was, harvesting to study, I think, analgesic effects. And I knew that something that goes to the mitochondria can be really interesting. Many of you have read this book by Erwin Schrödinger called What is Life? This is based on the lecture that he gave in the 1940s, and he had basically 2 lectures. One, he postulated that there must be a periodic molecule which is the carrier of heredity, and it was that thought that inspired Watson and Crick to discover, the double helix. But the world has forgotten his second lecture, which is bioenergetics. And he invoked the second law of thermodynamics to say that why is it that living systems do not have ever-increasing entropy and fall apart? There must be production of energy in this closed system that keeps, order in the living system. But that part, nobody work on mitochondria. In fact, when I first started doing this, people said, "Oh, only those Russian or Soviet, those Soviet days, the Soviet biochemists, they didn't have money and they just harvested mitochondria and they work on that." Well, I thought that there's something there. So we took it into man. We did all the manufacturing, all the preclinical work, and we took into man, thinking that it's a issue of ischemic damage, free radical scavenging upon reperfusion. That clinical trial failed. And in the meantime, we have found that by circular dichroism, that these peptides bind to a particular phospholipid in the inner membrane that makes up about 1/3 of the membrane, called cardiolipin. And then we found, there's patients, it's called the BART syndrome, B-A-R-T-H. These patients, they have a mutation in one of the enzymes in the biosynthesis of cardiolipin. And there are only 150 such patients in this country. Nevertheless, we started doing clinical trial with these patients and got spectacular results. As you can imagine, if your mitochondria is not working, you're not making enough ATP, and so these patients are always tired. some of them had to stay in bed, for 16 hours a day. And then we saw a human signal. And at the same time, as we were doing those trials, one baby from Arizona showed up at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. The family was visiting relatives in New Jersey, and the kid just ended up in heart failure. This is like an 8-month-old kid, These babies, they shouldn't go into heart failure. He was put on an ECMO machine, and the only way for him to come out of that is by heart transplant. And one of the physicians at Children's Hospital in Philadelphia, petitioned the FDA. By then, she had known about this molecule we were working with, to give this drug to this baby. And within a matter of weeks to months, that baby's heart totally remodeled. It was no longer, enlarged, fibrotic. And today, this boy is a thriving 2 years old, a toddler. That's what we got the FDA approval for. Now, what are some of the lessons from there? Well, first lesson took 20 years. Doing startup can be really exciting, exhilarating in the beginning. And when you're at it and you say, oh, I found this problem I want to work on, and but be prepared. For us, it took 20 years. We had to raise a lot of money. We had the company listed on NASDAQ to raise money, and then the clinical trial failed, and it became a penny stock. And then we took it private. Well, the journey is never a smooth one, doing a startup. You don't get it right the first time. Whether it be a disease model or a business model, you may not get it right the first time. In which case, every step of the way, you are faced with this fork in the road. Do I keep going, or do I call it quits? What is the risk reward at this point in the journey, and does it warrant that I should keep going? These are just very difficult questions for which there are no textbook answers. Every juncture that you come to, that you have to make this decision, the conditions are idiosyncratic to that very moment, and you just have to use your best judgment. Nobody has a crystal ball. It's all about making judgment calls. So I hear saying young people say, oh, I want to be a venture capitalist. Well, on what basis do you make these decisions as a venture capitalist? You just came out of school, I do not advocate young people, to become venture capitalists. You should go work in some company, you should learn how companies work, you should do a startup, learn it the hard way. And if you're lucky, to get a mentor, that can help you look at a lot of these cases, then you have some basis for making those judgment calls. That's a tough one. But anyway, we got through, got the FDA, and the FDA gave us so much grief, even at the very end. One thing that is very sad right now is the experienced people have left the FDA, and you're left with very inexperienced people who are there to check the box, and they say, oh, do this one more experiment, not knowing, to do that experiment is going to take 8 months, and the company is burning $2 million a month. So come up with $60 million, or else, lights out. We, at the end, really couldn't hold on anymore. And this happened only 2 months ago. We let it be known to the patient advocacy group. And by then, we have about 20 babies on the drug, and they're all doing very well. And we let it be known. If the FDA doesn't approve the drug, we're lights out, no more drugs. And they went into overdrive. Some of them, thank God, are very MAGA. And one family mobilized a whole congressional delegation from Georgia, that's where they live, to go meet with the commissioner of the FDA, and so on and so forth, put pressure. Anyway, so all is well that ends well. So that's one story. It takes a long time, and it is really hard. The second story I will talk about is about 10 years ago, I was introduced to 3 boys. They were friends from junior high school in a public high school in New Jersey, grew up together, and 2 of them got into Harvard, one got into the University of Chicago. They became an instant sensation. How do you apply? How do you get into these great schools? And they started running this college counseling business. And by the second year that they were an undergraduate, they were chalking up, $100,000 a month. And the 3 of them said, we're going to drop out of school. Now, I am not a proponent of Theo fellowships, of dropping out of school. As I had said, this is such a high-risk proposition. If you have a degree at the end, at least, even if your venture fails, you have a degree with which you can go find a job. So these 3 boys, they dropped out, and we were introduced, and we started, again, with a business model that didn't work. The unit economics just didn't work. But that's all they knew, and they kept going. And then it became, we sort of morphed the business into a data business. Now, some of you students might have, in fact, used this service. It's called College Find. Has anyone used it when you apply to Cornell? There's one hand there. Well, 70% of the students admitted to the Ivies are on our platform. We have over 1.5 million high school students who are on the platform, but I won't go into all that detail. And then Gen AI came along. The boys started building agents in January of 2024, launched their product in June of 2024. By December 2024, they chalk up $10 million. And they kept going. And so with that $10 million of run rate, we then went out to the market to raise money. And see, when you go out to raise money, it's the investors who set the value. You don't really set the value. And lo and behold, there were investors willing to pay us a valuation of $700 million. And we kept going, kept building more agents, now not only doing admissions, but also handling a lot of the administrative tasks that universities have to perform to service the students. And now we just turned down somebody offer us a valuation double the 700 million valuation. We said, no, that's not good enough. You missed the boat. And so there are these moments that you just have to jump onto it. I totally understand why Bill Gates felt he had to drop out of Harvard to catch that moment. But those moments don't come around, every year. These are longer-term cycles. Over the 10 years I've been with these boys, I said to them more than once, boys, anytime you want to go back to school, I'll go talk to the dean and make sure you get back in. The official policy is you have 5 years, but I'm sure I can pull some strings for them. And the boy said, nah, it's okay. Which says to me, there's a message here. How relevant is that degree to the success of these boys? Which again, for me, places the burden on we who are in higher education. How relevant is the education that we're giving to young people? I saw another boy just 2 weeks ago, young man at MIT, pack his courses in coursework from Tuesday to Thursday, and from Friday to Monday, he does his startup. For him, it's interesting. These boys, I'm sorry, they're all boys. I just haven't met the right girl. That's how they do. And it's a statement of how relevant is our education to these boys, for these students, for what they do. I just offer another job. I just offer a job to this boy from the University of Michigan. He spent 80 hours a week running the solar car team. That is, as you know, Michigan, I'm sure like here as well, engineering is a big enterprise, and there are 150 students in the solar car team, and they elect the president, and he was elected to be the president. He spent 80 hours, and the boy still, keeps a 3.9 grade point average, majoring in math, and but I didn't offer him the job because he majored in math. I offered him the job because he ran, that solar car team with 80 hours a week of dedication. So College Mind is this second story I would tell you, and I truly mean it, that it is incumbent on us, the older folks, to make the education relevant to the future generations. The third story I'll tell you is another student-led startup. 3 students from MIT, this is from their undergraduate mechanical engineering course, and they designed this like a watch that vibrates, and they thought they could use that to counter the tremor, whether in Parkinson or essential tremor patients. And so I worked with them, and they just finished a clinical trial. You could turn the switch on, and the tremor stops. So at first we thought, well, it's the direct effect of that vibration. But in this clinical trial, what they have done is to treat the patients for a month and then stop. And then the tremor didn't come back, which means that by stimulation from the periphery, they have reprogrammed the circuits in the central nervous system that somehow is compensated, the defect that they had. Now, this point, I think, is relevant, especially from yesterday. And that is, you saw yesterday the announcement of the Nobel Prize in Medicine. 2 of the 3 recipients did their work in industry. It is no longer that the best works are done in academia, and then industry kind of takes that and do further development based on that. In this case, probably it would be very difficult for academic scientists to attempt this type of experiment or clinical trial, which resulted in now, in fact, I have another company that uses another form of sensory stimulation from the periphery, and we also are seeing reprogramming of the CNS. So I now just from 2 companies can somewhat generalize that you can reprogram the circuits in the central nervous system by stimulation from the periphery. So this is very important basic science, but prosecuted in industry. And so there's a lot of exciting stuff going on. It is no longer a dichotomy of what is basic science and what is industry. The 2 are all mixed up. And if you can scrounge up resources, you can do anything you want. If you're in academia, you scrounge up resources by writing grants. If you're in industry or you're in the startup world, you scrounge up resources by raising money, from investors. And if you're able to convince somebody to write you a check, you have the resources, to do the work. So I see Jingen tells me my time is up. So happy to.
Thank you very much.
Oh, pleasure.
As you know, this lecture is very powerful. Give us a message that higher education needs to be reformed to educate the better generation to solve the real world problems. And also students and maybe even faculty to need a considerate and conventional career, right? So, and then the 3 stories, the 3 case studies are really convincing, demonstrate the new vision of knowledge, science, innovation, and also determination, and also resilience to failures. So now I invite our Dean, Ben Holton, to make a commentary about Gerald's lecture, and then you have a few questions and have a dialogue.
Great. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Commentary. I don't know about that. I'm not here for commentary. I heard so many outstanding elements in what you were saying, and there's a lot of themes, and I want to give everyone a chance to kind of jump in with questions. But I guess I would just kick it off a little bit where Shigen began, which is, one of my favorite quotes is a Goethe quote, and it's, "Knowing is not enough, we must apply. Willing is not enough, we must do." And I do think that that is something that CALS gets right more often than not, but I also feel like we do need to think in much more of a disruptive manner in higher education. And as you point out, the current conditions are giving us a chance to rise up with new models. But I guess I would just very generally, if I gave you a magic wand and I made you dean for the day.
I'd say no, thank you.
No, I get that. I appreciate that. That's quite an endorsement of where I'm sitting here. But if I were to make you in charge of higher education, how about the Department of Education? Yeah. And you had one thing that you say, education higher ed really needs to change this for our students, for our faculty. Is there one thing that you would point to, or a couple of things that we should really be thinking much more about to meet the needs of doing and making sure our students are prepared for success?
Yes. I think it's a cultural thing. For example, MIT, I have done 5 or 6 startups from MIT, and much fewer from Harvard, even though, you know, I live right there. And MIT just has, in its DNA, in its culture, and the engineers, you know, just get stuff done. And everybody is there, you know, thinking of getting some stuff done. That is a culture that is so pervasive at the Institute. Now, how do you build culture? Well, you need leaders, and leaders set the agenda. Leaders sort of set the tone of what do we celebrate. If our, let's say, faculty promotion, tenure decisions are all based on whether you publish, how many papers and what impact factor and all this, that is setting a culture. That's what you celebrate. People who publish those papers. And many of those papers just go nowhere. If you make tangible actions and reward systems to celebrate getting stuff done, innovation, you know, having patents filed or starting companies, that's one way of changing the culture. I also think it's very important that there should be more porosity between academia and industry. And that could mean ideas. You know, the ideas has to flow back and forth, and you have to go out to industry to source ideas. What problems are they, you know, having a difficult time solving? Or money. Money should flow back and forth, usually one way from industry to academia, but also in personnel. I highly recommend universities to create more professors of the practice. People who became very good at what they do, not because they had published so many papers, but because they had worked in that sector for a long time. I heard from the undergraduates at Harvard that there's this professor who's really good, who teaches software. And this person had worked at Microsoft for 15 years. He had done his own startup. So I said, oh, if the kids tell me he's so good, I should meet him. So I took him out to dinner. And he told me, oh, what a hard time, you know. They made him jump through so many hoops to get that appointment. Like, and still, some of the real professors sort of sneer at him as, you know, you're only the professor of the practice. Well, this is all culture. Do you celebrate someone, you know, who's really written some important software, you know, for Microsoft, which is now being used for billions of people or whatever, right? So these are cultural landmarks that as an institution we have to build to signal and to message all the constituents that this is important to us and we celebrate this.
Great point. Excellent. Okay, so I want to turn to the audience now. We have students here, we have faculty, staff, so why don't we open it up with a question for Gerald? And you're going to have to jump in because we don't have a ton of time, so don't be shy. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciated the talk. And I was thinking, just because there's a room of educators and students and the focus around being relevant in our education, one thing I was trying to think around is like the blend of science and industry is very interesting, but trying to think around those students who dropped out and trying to figure out what's relevant. And I was trying to figure out the driving factor, and it really seems like that metric has been the money or the currency, right? So I was...
It's actually not.
Okay.
Surprisingly, you know, these students who are doing startup I find very few of them are like, oh, I want to be a unicorn. No, I want to make oodles of money, retire by the age of 28. I don't, in fact, I don't see that at all. These are people who are just passionate about some problem, and I'm going to, work on this. I frankly was a bit scared for these three boys. I consider myself somewhat responsible. What if they fail? What if this company went nowhere and they have no degree? And that's why I more than once suggested to them, you want to go back to school? It's okay, I'll help you. There's an inner driving, I think, self-selecting. And now, this is not to say that people are born with this type of aspirations. I met in one of the two apartments that these founders rent for me. There's one girl, oh, there's a girl. And she grew up in a single-parent family, Vietnamese American in Fort Worth, Texas. She knew nothing about startups, she knew nothing about this. But by being or hanging out with these other kids, then she sort of got it, and now she is a startup. And she's raised a few $100,000.
Question, yeah. Sunny.
So, yes, I'm Sunny Jung. I'm the biological environment engineer. I'm teaching the capstone design, which is to solve the real world problem in class. I think you mentioned that there's a huge knowledge out there and a lot of ideas out there, but I think most important skill students to need to develop to critical thinking, what idea might be more feasible to solve certain problem. So I think you might meet like hundreds of students with a bunch of different ideas every year. So like, what is your strategy when you say you want to invest certain idea? Like, how are you gonna decide? Yeah.
That is a very personal thing. It's sort of like I went to the ice cream bar here, and there are 20 flavors. I pick one, and Ross pick another. It's a very much a matter of personal preference, of taste. It's not unlike wine. Some people like their wine this way, others like, it's quite personal. But there are common features, rubrics. When I look at a business plan, there are rubrics that I instinctively apply to the case, like unit economics, like how much can you get paid for doing this? How much does it cost to do it? Like scalability. I love the software business because you write the software, whether it be 10 people that use it or 10 million people that use it, it's the same software. I like, some businesses which are winner take all. These are the platform businesses that once you have the market share, it's virtually impossible for any competitor to come in and take market share from you. These are networks, where you need all sides of the market to participate, and it's very difficult. So there are rubrics, but by looking at a lot of these, we develop instincts. So sometimes people think instinct is, it's not. I tell you, your instinct is the summation of all your lived experiences, your learning, your failures, your observations of others. It's not a raw native. It's not tabula rasa. it's really the summation of all that you have learned and lived through.
So let me just pick up on that. So there's this notion, right, that, well, we have to be relevant in our education, and we really have to transform the way in which we're doing that, and we talk about startups. And then there were two of the case studies. One was be patient, and the other one was don't be patient. And then there's this notion of instinct, which is an ensemble of experiences, as you're pointing out. And so, like, in some ways, I can find a little paradox in what you're saying, because a broad-based education is going to naturally produce a broad range of experiences, which you don't know how those will manifest towards success. At the same time, there's these other two notions of get into a startup, and maybe education just isn't relevant to your. So I'm wondering how you would unpack that set for us and get us to understand that.
Well, the world is messy, and the world is full of paradoxes. And so to think that the world can be one way or one-sided, it's just naive. Embrace paradoxes. And there's no one way. Being patient may work, being impatient may work. You really have to follow your instinct, which is that ensemble that you talk about. I advocate for students to have very broad exposures, because the danger is you don't know what you don't know. If you have broad exposure, you at least have a sense of what you don't know. And now with AI, you don't know, no problem. You learn it. You learn it on the fly. But the danger is you don't know what you don't know. So I advocate for broad exposure. You're on quarter system here or semester? You're on semester. I remember, as an engineering student, you have to take so many courses in humanities and whatever. I advocate that students have certain latitude to take many courses. Instead of being exposed to 6 areas by 6 semester courses, why don't you cut that into half semester courses and expose the students to 12 areas? And now they have a foundation, and the rest, when they feel they need to drill down, it's ChatGPT. It'll teach you anything.
Great. So we have a lot of students here. Are there any questions from our students?
I just wanted to ask you, where do you think in your model of democratizing innovation across universities, do disciplines like environmental science or social science, not inherently capitalistic oriented disciplines, or say public health, which you've invested in, where do you think they feature in that model of democratizing innovation?
Well, there's social enterprises where you have the double bottom line, and I think those should be equally celebrated. Yeah, but then even within that, as you are addressing a problem, perhaps in a low resource area where it may not be possible to create profitable businesses, one should still think about how do you make it sustainable. I think last night at dinner I had this conversation. Philanthropy is not a good way to. The recipient tend to get addicted to it. And you have to keep and you have to keep raising money. That's why all these American Cancer Society, they have this charity balls every year. I much rather build businesses which are self-sustaining. So you may be solving a problem that is humanitarian in nature, but the business model by which you build the solution should be one that is self-sustaining. And the capitalistic way is still probably the most self-sustaining model.
We still have time for one student question.
Another student. Oh, and you have Dr. Chan up here, captive, just for a little bit longer. He said a lot of interesting things. Yeah.
Hi there, my name is Jake. It's a pleasure to meet you. I was a little bit more curious about the venture capital side of what you were talking about. When a lot of people are starting these startups, I know a lot of people's initial thoughts are, oh, what makes my idea unique? What makes my idea something different than every other person? And I think one thing I was really curious about is when you're coming from a venture capitalist point of view, what is the it factor, so to speak? What makes a company worth investing in? What are the things that you guys look for in those investments?
So that issue is not one relevant only to the founder, but also to the investor. If I invested in that company, I don't know there are not 3 other companies out there, and that's the beauty of science and technology. Science, the endless frontier. You have this way of solving it, someone else is. So you have to do your due diligence as a founder to convince yourself that you have a unique edge. The investors have to do likewise. The world is big, and do I find every time I come across a business plan that it's so crowded that there are many other alternative or competing solutions? No, actually, surprisingly not. I think human ingenuity, and that's something that each one of you possess, you can come up with something that is so unique that no one had thought of, that gives you an edge to there's problems that you think, just staring you right in the face, and yet nobody has addressed it. I love it.
So maybe this is a good time to end this keynote speech and the dialogue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gerald.
We hope Dr. Chan will be still around at the process session, so you can talk to him in person. Now, yes, Ben, please stay. So now is another exciting event for today is to have our inaugurate Innovation Awards. As we expected Dr. Chan coming, so we prepared in response to change the culture, change the academic system. So we have 4 awards today. So the
Do you want
Now, we have a few quotes here. So you say, life-changing innovation are born when we dare to dream beyond the ordinary, commit to making these dreams reality. I think this is response to what your case studies as well. So we have, the first is the Best Innovator and Inventor Awards. We have 4 outstanding nominees. We'd like to thank all the nominators and nominees, and also the nominees for your help to get the package together. The winner is the best vendor, Gerald Peters.
It's going to be a flash here. I don't know. Yo, congratulations. Congratulations. There you go. Is the lighting okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, there's another quote, the only way to discover the limits of possible is to go beyond into impossible, which is Dr. Chen, you have a great story about this. And then we have two nominees, the best, this is the second award, the best entrepreneurship engagement. We have two outstanding individuals who also met Dr. Chen last night with the students. They are not only themselves, the great inventors and engage in industry evolution, but the students also doing great. So the winner is Foster.
Congratulations, Bob. Of course, of course. One more step back. There we go.
I think this is the one innovation distinction between a leader and a follower. Yeah. This is Steve Jobs. So, Dr. Chen, you agree? All right, so we have, this is the best student entrepreneur of the year. We have 3 outstanding student nominees, and also they had the privilege to have dinner with Dr. Chen last night. They had a great discussion about the research and the discoveries and the innovation. The winner is Sean Min. Coming together is the beginning, staying together is progress, and working together is success. So our last award is the best partnership winner, Angry Orchard Company and Cornell Greg Packer.
Guys, let's figure out who gets this. Congrats. Maybe stand just a little bit.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. 3, 2, 1, and 1.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to all the winners. Congratulations to all these nominees. We hope you continue to be nominated next year. You get the award next year. So also thank you, Ben, for giving the awards. Now it's my great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Vice President for Innovation External Engagement Strategy at Cornell, Dr. Christine Van Vliet. She connects Cornell's innovation ecosystem here in Ithaca, Geneva, New York City, at Cornell Tech and the Cornell Biomedical College, including technology license and support of Cornell-related startups. Christine is a faculty in the College of Engineering. She holds a joint appointment in several departments here in Ithaca and also Cornell Medicine. She earns a material in engineering bachelor's degree from Brown University and a PhD at MIT. She was on the faculty at MIT before she moved to Cornell. She specialized in the coupling between chemistry and mechanics and material interface with applications from medicine to energy. She led an international research translation team focused on innovation in cell therapy manufacture for over 10 years. Result in dozens of patents, multiple startup companies. She is a scientific co-founder of the Artificial Exome Lab, a biotech platform company. Dr. Van Vliet is a co-leader the national academic of the most, addressing the nervous system. She led the national academic most recent report on biological and physical science research in space. Okay, without a few, you and I would like to invite Christine come here to share her perspective of the Cornell innovation strategy and her partnership with the college. Christine.
Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be here with you all today. It's just a wonderful day to celebrate. And I must pick up on Gerald Chan's wonderful remarks, right? You get what you celebrate, and having Innovation Day at CALS is a tremendous way to recognize that. No matter what part of Cornell we're from, today is a special day. So I wanted to thank Dean Holton and Professor Lay and Marius and the team for really giving us a day to celebrate what we're very proud of, which is our innovators and our inventors. Oh, thank you. So I'll just share this from a little bit more of a perspective of what does it mean to have innovation at Cornell? How do we partner together? Because we're all part of it. It's certainly more than an idea, but we often use the light bulb as the spark of innovation, right? But it's much more than that. Just having an idea is not enough. We heard that in these case studies. You've seen that in your day-to-day. And so just an idea is not enough. Even an idea as great and as creative as, wouldn't it be nice to work after dark, right? Or wouldn't it be nice to not have to do my problem set by candlelight? And wouldn't it be nice to iterate over and over again about what the filament should be made out of, right? But the idea is not enough. Part of the reason why it's so great to be an innovator in an academic setting is that you have that ability to seed it, to plant it, to cultivate it, eventually to harvest it, to think about what's next, right? And it really takes what some people call an innovation ecosystem, and others call, and I think it's very appropriate for Cornell, an innovation orchard. You've got to have those ideas, but you've got to have the people, you've got to have the soil, you've got to have the patience, and sometimes that's patient capital, and sometimes that's just the resilience of figuring out, what do I need? What does the business world need? What are the resources that I need to actually take it to the next level and go from a seedling to an actual orchard, right? And so that's really a fantastic way to do that in a university setting where you can take a lot of risk. So if we think about that in the sense of, how does Cornell partner? The idea is always most important, right? So the fact that you're at a place where you love to do research, and research that solves problems or discovers new ideas that don't yet have a problem match, that's certainly where it starts. And that's where CALS shines. Life is changing, and you attack the problems to solve that. Sometimes it's use-inspired, right? So, for example, you may need a water purification strategy, or you may need a way to think about transcription and translation in genes differently. Or you may need a way to understand what's in the soil and how do we remediate that. Right, so it can be use-inspired, but it could be discovery-based. Now, what do we say? What's the, when necessity is the mother of invention, right? And when we think about necessity being the mother of invention, we always think there's a problem to solve. But what you see here is sometimes we invent things, we don't know what problem we're trying to solve yet. And that's the challenge of turning an idea, right, into an invention, not a patent, an invention, an innovation that's going to change the world. So these can go back and forth, an idea and a discovery, and a problem you're trying to solve. And you're constantly trying to learn about your world to map those together. Now, it takes a lot of other things besides research and an idea, right? It takes resources, as we've mentioned. Those resources are, yes, money to pay your people, money for space, but that's also a lot of connections that you need. These resources that are connections between people, those relationships, that's, among the very most important things that get an idea into practice. You also need those who are actually doing that creative work, whether it's at the bench, in the lab, in the field. Right? So innovation is really getting an idea through your relationships in your network to become a new product, a new process, a new practice, right? That's how you change the world. That's why it's exciting to put those ideas into motion, as we heard through those case studies. So how many of you have invented something that you also disclosed? Yeah. And the award winners, yeah, so what does it mean to disclose? It means to share, right? Like I have an idea I'm so excited about, I want to share it. I'm not gonna share it with everybody yet, but I'm gonna share it so I can protect it. And why do I wanna protect it? So I can make sure it gets out into the real world. And it doesn't mean we don't collaborate as we do that, but it really means that we think about how to get those ideas in a form where investments can be made of time, of people, of resources. Okay, and then while it makes it look like it's just a nice circle, of course, real life isn't like that, we've heard that, but you also need these partnerships with what you might call as industry. So if this is a symbol for industry, these are companies, these are connections, these are people who help get it to market one way or another. Now that industry could be a startup, so I showed that not as a garage, but a nice little house maybe where these people who chose not to finish their degree are living, right? So this startup culture, that's part of the innovation, but not the only way to get there, right? So sometimes you work with an established company, sometimes you become the established company. Sometimes you become a company that actually partners with a larger company. And then sometimes you're doing these consortium approaches where you've got to work with many, many, many partners because of the nature of the business, right? You have to grow the orchard. Now, the point of doing all this, as we saw in the examples today, as we've talked about all afternoon at CALS Innovation Day, is not so that it makes money. You want to make impact on the world, but there is an opportunity for revenue, and you want to think about how to invest that revenue back into that great system and keep those ideas going. But it doesn't matter if those ideas don't have positive impact, not just on the world or our part of the world, right? But overall, right, on the people, on the planet. That's the goal. And certainly in this college at Cornell and in many others. So thinking about that, when you draw it out like this, you say, oh, well, that's pretty simple. I have an idea, I have a problem, they get matched. I get some resources, I practice my resilience, I get connections to industry, or I create a new company, and then I have impact. As we've heard in these case studies and those that we celebrated today, it is a long and winding road. You will go back and forth and across the circle many times, and it's the relationships you make that last and develop the intuition, the instinct, the progress, right? Not that you won't make mistakes. So we think about these partnerships as really key to driving innovation forward at Cornell and at multiple universities. Industry is a path to market, but companies can also be those that fund your ideas. They might be near-term interest, they might be long-term interest, but they're very much a partner in how to fund and bring those ideas to fruition. And industry can also be a collaborator. And in fact, in several of the stories that you heard today, there's a hidden subtext. The disease you go after today might not have been the right one at the right time, not just to get regulatory approval, but actually also to make that business case, right? Especially in the context of, say, rare diseases like Barth syndrome, right? So you really have to think about always thinking about what's next, and those partnerships with those who have expertise that you don't is the magic ticket. Those partnerships are also, in the second point, the people and the expertise to license and launch that for impact. So if you've thought of the idea, if you and your team have worked on that idea, maybe you've even prototyped that idea, there's expertise that you don't have about how do you actually get that into market? What does that right partnership look like? Is that us starting a startup company? Is that us working with a company that has more experience than us? Is it getting access to a market? And you've seen all of those examples in CALS. Right? Sometimes it's connecting Professor Brown's research to a market with the next best apple that is needed. Right? Sometimes it's taking a great technology in agriscience and licensing it so that it can get used globally, not starting a company because that wouldn't make the maximum impact at the time. And sometimes it's working with those strategic partners so they can provide that funding and that patient capital for years, sometimes decades, before you're able to actually make the impact on the patient and the market, right? So those connections, these are examples that we've made. Now, in the spirit of celebrating, how do you work with Cornell? How does Cornell work with CALS? We're all individuals. We're all important, have important concepts that we want to get across. But here's just a couple of examples that we highlighted earlier today, and just to bring them back. They include some of the people in this room, and they included long and winding roads, right? So Persista Bio isn't a diabetes treatment. It's a path that enables a diabetes treatment. How to think about that. The road, how do you connect it with other Cornell assets? How do you think about how to get that in front of the right people so it can make impact on the patient and the market? That's what Alice and her team are helping that team to do, and they're doing themselves. And we've incubated it at Cornell, close to campus, so it can get that best possible start. Regen, another great example of taking research that came out of Cornell. So it's a Cornell-rooted invention and a Cornell-rooted company, incubating it at Cornell, and then getting it into many markets in the energy space. And then again, sometimes the startup is not the path. You can have a really great entrepreneurial mindset and do great entrepreneurship in a company, or work with companies that already have that mindset. And that was the example here with Cantor AgriScience, a Cornell-rooted technology licensed to that company so it could have global impact and protect pollinators. So all kinds of relationships that we can have when you match that idea to that problem. So how do we help partner in that? Part of it is in making sure that we can help make those connections when you have a research idea or when you have a problem that you really want to solve. How do you build those relationships? Last week we talked about this, and we included Marius on the panel, lots of different researchers there saying, I want to connect with a company, I'm not sure how. Or I might want to start a company, but I'm not sure if there are already companies in this space. Right? So we can advise on that, we can discuss with that, not because all the experts are here, but because Cornell has this network of entrepreneurs in residence. So innovation at Cornell is really about connecting with funding and with companies for multiple reasons, translating the technology, and people are definitely the technology translation engine, creating companies, because we have brilliant ideas, but it's not just enough to have those ideas, right? And we have many budding entrepreneurs who may not be inventors, but are really excited about helping to get those ideas to market. And that's what is so fun. So I'll give you another graphic that oversimplifies the situation, just to drive home the point that part of why it's great to do this in a university, and not all inventions come out of universities, of course, is that that cycle of innovation is always grounded in research, right? You have an idea or you have a problem, but you've got to connect it. And you do that through research. That takes leadership because you're sharing the risk and the reward, right? And we've talked about that. Starting new ideas that become new companies, there's shared risk and reward. And having a great research culture that's risk-taking, and we celebrate that, that's one part of that circle. The other is, especially here at Cornell, the idea of being able to do great research is so that it can have the greatest good. That's shared risk and reward as well, and that's where you need that expertise and partnership on what's the impact to market, what's the impact to patients, who are the partnerships that we need to actually get this through. Not because they'll all succeed, but because that's how you learn, you develop the instinct. And so we're really fortunate to have people across Cornell, some that I work with very closely, some that you work with most closely in the colleges, who are experts in this space and making these connections not for you, with you as a partner, so that you can actually maximize that impact as you have questions. That's a pipeline of funding, for example, our Ignite and our Catalyst program, to take those ideas that are way too early stage for prime time and move them on. That's the engines and the I-cores that we have for education. It's the incubators and the accelerators, right? So that's all part of that orchard that we are part of because we're part of Cornell. And so it's a pleasure to think about not just what we celebrated today, but what we're incubating, nurturing, discovering, and trying for tomorrow. So thank you for this. I realize that I am standing between us and a great reception so that we can talk even more about this. But it's a wonderful day to celebrate what you all have cultivated and what we will be able to harvest soon. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. When I get very excited to introduce her, I forgot to mention So she served on the White House Advanced Manufacture Partnership 2.0 and the World Economy Forum Global Future Council in 2013 to 15. So she has been an alumni of the U.S. Defense Science Study Group. So she has been very, very influential at the national level. So thank you very much for your very useful insights, and we're looking forward to work with you. So now there's close our oral sessions for the Innovation Award. We have one more most important posters to show. Before that, I'd like to recognize Tiffany. Tiffany, are you there? Yeah. So Tiffany has worked very hard to put all the posters together, get everybody on time and committed to this show. So let's give her a round of applause to appreciate it. Before we go to the poster, Tiffany asked me to request each of you go to room 148, take some food and drinks, because will be a big waste if we don't use it. So, all right. So thank you very much. See you at the posters.